And there we go. So, right. Thank you to everybody for joining us. Welcome back. If you're new here, please like and subscribe if you like this video. We have a wonderful group of guests from the intelligence community regularly. We've had members of the CIA, KGB, MI6, and today is Sir David Omand, the former director of GCHQ. How are you doing, sir?
Whoa. Hi. Good to be on this show. What are we going to talk about?
Oh, there is so much that I'd like to take a deep delve into, and one of the things for the Americans watching, GCHQ is kind of like the UK equivalent of the NSA. I think that's probably fair to say, don't you?
Yes, and it's the UK's digital intelligence agency and also cybersecurity agency. GCHQ has the National Cybersecurity Centre as part of it. And as you can imagine, they're pretty busy these days.
Oh, I have no doubt. And so I want to dispel a few crazy myths that kind of circulate amongst the general public, because I've been doing this for some time now, and since going out publicly on YouTube and having different guests on and that kind of thing, you'd be amazed at some of the questions I get asked and some of the statements that I come across. And people are very much under the impression that the boys at the donut, that was hundreds and hundreds of people in cubicles sitting and listening to every single conversation of every single phone call that happens, and nothing else. And it's not quite like that, is it?
When you think about the hundreds of millions of communications every minute going around the planet, and GCHQ it's an overseas, it's looking at intelligence from overseas, then it's clearly both practically impossible and ethically completely unconscionable that there should be such mass surveillance. So GCHQ's work, like the other British intelligence agencies, is regulated by law. And the two key words in the law, which is necessity and proportionality. So you've got to have necessity, you've got to have a good reason why a particular target is one that you have a genuine need to be interested in for national security or counterterrorism purposes. And what you're doing, the degree of intrusion, has got to be proportionate to the kind of harm that you're trying to stop. So simply hoovering up everybody's communication, listening to them, that's not how it's done. But that's not to say that where there's a legitimate reason for believing that a particular communication channel is being used by terrorists or criminals or people smugglers, all the bad guys, or a hostile, potentially hostile state, then that doesn't deserve, careful attention. We need secret intelligence to keep ourselves safe.
Exactly. So there you have it, people. We are not interested in your cat pictures. We don't care about your barbecue late last night with your auntie. It's to do with getting valuable and credible intelligence. And like what you mentioned there, I love that the word proportionate, which is hugely kind of. I mean, so again, being in this field, I get lots of. I've been in the position where they go, "Why are you spying on everybody?" And I'm like, we don't spy on everybody. Apart from the fact that, like you say, it's impossible, we've got no reason to. But the same people who are very kind of defensive about the government watching everybody and every motion and everything else will also be the same people that the moment there's a terrorist attack or an attempted terrorist attack, saying, "Well, why weren't you watching them?"
Well, in the old days, and it's not so far ago, long ago, someone would climb up a telegraph pole and put a crocodile clip on the wire of a telephone in the house. Most people don't have those kind of home phones anymore. We all carry mobile devices. So it follows that if you do have a genuine suspect, a genuine need to try and collect a communication, you're going to have to pick that communication out using very smart, innovative ways, artificial intelligence and all the rest of it. You've got to pick that out of the bulk data of the hundreds of millions of communications every minute that are going around the planet.
Yeah, I remember though. You literally had to tap a phone while but like you say, you had to click and get the same kind of signals going to your device as what you had, going to their phone, and that was back in the days of the HOW, or the Home Office warrant, which I'm sure you'll know more about than me, which I believe has been changed now, hasn't it? So they don't go through a Home Office warrant anymore. I believe it's judicial now, isn't it? Is that right?
It's it's a double lock. So if you want to carry out the most intrusive kinds of investigation, intrusive methods, then you require a warrant signed by the Secretary of State. For domestic, it's the Home Secretary. Otherwise, you'd be looking at the Foreign Secretary.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to be countersigned by a judge. And the judge in question is the Senior Surveillance Commissioner, a very senior judge who specializes. His role is to ensure that the British intelligence agencies are following domestic law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is something, I remember way back when I used to work in the field doing this kind of thing to get, what was the HOW back then, the Home Office warrant back then. It took so much time and a certain amount of evidence, and it was a bit of a catch-22, because it was like, well, we need the intercept to be able to get the evidence, to be able to get the Home Office warrant. So it was a bit of an awkward situation at times.
It's also the case, like any of those Netflix movie series, you don't know till the end of the show who it was actually the guilty party.
Yeah.
But what you establish are, reasonable grounds for suspicion. So you have suspects, and then part of the process of gathering intelligence is elimination, saying we are now satisfied that this person is not a member of the terrorist group. And gradually you home in on what you hope will be the gathering of intelligence, which enables either the plot to be frustrated, or the individuals to be arrested and put in front of a court, or just simply disruption of that particular activity, so keeping the public safe.
Have you ever had anything where you've come across a person of interest, and you've thought it's going to take you down one particular path, and it's ended up going a completely different route, either still leading to possibly an arrest or an investigation, but something completely unrelated, or even going the other way, and it turns out it was something that they weren't using code words, that they were actually kind of developing a new computer game or something crazy like that?
It's always the case.
Yeah.
In intelligence work, the information is fragmentary. It's you follow a trail in an investigation, and very often that can just peter out, and you conclude, well, probably there's nothing in this. Or alternatively, you then uncover a group of people who are genuinely engaged in a criminal enterprise that you hadn't suspected was going on.
Yeah.
But until you've done the investigation, you're not going to know. And whether it's cyber attackers, whether it's the criminal gangs attempting to hack into our systems and defraud us, or whether it's in the physical world where for example, people smuggling gangs. You pull on a thread and you keep pulling, and if you're lucky, their defenses will unravel, and then you've got them.
Yeah, and I'm going to keep switching and changing between subjects here a little bit, but with you mentioned cybercrime there, and which is on the rise exponentially recently. What do you think are, apart from the obvious like China and Russia and coordinated threats against a nation, what do you think for the individual are the kind of the highest threats in the area of cybercrime, and what should people be more aware of?
For all of us, we've got this threat from criminal gangs. Now, sometimes these are criminals who are hiding inside what they regard as friendly countries, whose law enforcement is not cracking down on them. So they've got a sort of license. And as long as they don't, for example, within Russia, it's been, I think, well demonstrated that there are criminal groups. The Russian authorities don't seem to bother them very much, provided they stay away from Russian targets. So as long as they're attacking us, that's fine. Now, what are they trying to do? They want to get into our systems. They want to get our bank details. Very often these days with corporate fraud, they want to get sufficiently far into a corporate network that they can actually find, the database of customer details and the bank account details of the company's customers. Or they may want to imitate the chief executive, sending a message out saying, I've just had a reminder we owe $150,000 to X. Can you send it to them? Here's their bank account details. And of course, those are not the details of the supplier. It's been changed. And lo and behold, the company accounts department ends up paying the criminals. And then, of course, you have ransomware. And that can hit all of us. You suddenly discover you've got a message on your computer screen saying your device is locked. If you want it unlocked and your data restored, then you've got to pay a ransom in Bitcoin, and the screen gives you instructions on what you need to do. I think the general advice is don't pay, because the criminal groups will know that you're somebody who pays, so you'll get attacked again by somebody.
Yeah.
Because they know you're a soft touch. So it's best not to pay. And of course, if you've taken, you, me, everyone else, have taken simple precautions to back up data, keep it on a separate hard drive or a thumb drive. So if your computer is locked up, it's irritating. It may have to be completely reformatted. You're going to lose all your information, but you can get it back because you've checked it.
That's
where exactly I feel very sorry is the noted cases where somebody's written a book.
Oh, yeah.
And there's one manuscript and they've typed it away, and then they get hit and it's all gone. Yeah. That happened, I think, to John Steinbeck, and the dog ate his manuscript and he didn't have a copy. The electronic equivalent, I'm sure, as an author, I would say would be just as bad.
I have countless emails to myself where I've updated my manuscript or written another chapter or what, and I've attached it to an email that I've then sent to myself, and so I've got record after record. And like you say, this is like a 1 terabyte hard drive that every so often I'll go and I'll back up anything that's important documents and keep it completely.
Compared with the cost these days of a decent laptop, that small hard drive. The other way of approaching it, which I'm now using and many people are using, is to find a secure cloud. And then all your information is automatically backed up into the cloud, and you should be able to get it back even if your device is compromised.
And again, it's one of those things that for me, having doing all, email it to yourself if it's important, keep it on your external hard drive as well, and back it up at the cloud. And that way, even if somebody manages to get your passwords and lock you out and you can't get into the cloud for any reason, or I know there are fail safes in place there as well, but no matter what happens, if you've got 3 different kind of backups and means of backing it up, then you've got a higher chance of recovering it should it go wrong.
There's a phrase in use these days in the cybersecurity world. It's a bit of jargon, but we talk about a zero trust environment. And I think that's it's a useful concept, because what it's saying to us is, don't imagine that the firewalls, valuable though they are, and the filters are going to keep out a determined bad guy. Or you'll make a mistake and you'll click on the wrong link in some email you didn't recognize was potentially malicious. So they're in. So the zero trust environment means that you have taken great care with the information, the crown jewels, the book you've just written, the crucial photographs of the family that can never be replaced, and you back them up to a secure cloud or to one of your little hard drive devices. So you've taken that step. It also means dual identification systems, which are a bit of a pain, where you can't get straight onto the website. They send your other device a code, you have to type that in. But what that does do is cut out a lot of very basic criminal phishing going on, trying to get you to click on the wrong link. The active cyber defense by the British National Cybersecurity Centre, particularly protecting government employees so that they can't get onto bad websites because the system blocks them. And those sites which, if you were to get on them, would then, without you knowing it, slip a little bit of malicious code into your system, which would enable the bad guys to take control of your machine when you don't know it's happening, perhaps control your camera, control your microphone, and certainly have a good look through all your data. And you really don't want that to happen.
No, definitely not, especially not in my case. So I'm going to go a slightly different route here. I'm going to change the subject a little bit because I've had one or two people who kind of ask me regular or frequent questions, and I've given them answers. So if the people who've asked me want to know, then I'm sure there are other people in the world that want to know as well. One of the biggest fears, especially over in the States, is that of an EMP attack, or for those who don't know, an electronic magnetic pulse attack, which disables all kind of electronic devices. And I'm frequently asked, if there was an EMP attack on a Western country, how would things happen? We wouldn't go back to flags. And I say, no, I've explained that there is a fail-safe, there is a system, and I don't want to go too much into how it all works, but there is a network that's kind of in place, so that should all the other communications be disabled amongst the general public, the government can still kind of maintain regulation of the running, and there won't be like kind of mass panic. Can we talk about it a little bit? We don't have to, like I said, we don't have to go into the technicalities, but just as a little bit of reassurance, I'm sure the states have got a very similar protocol. What can we say about that?
Well, the first thing that we should say is this could happen naturally.
You're true.
Here in the UK, we've been enjoying the most spectacular northern lights in the sky as a result of high-powered charged particles being ejected by the sun and then interacting with our ionosphere. It's been spectacular, but it hasn't quite reached the threshold, which would start to knock out GPS satellites, interfere with satellite communication, and indeed with devices on the ground. But that could happen. And it could happen maliciously by an adversary detonating an EMP weapon. Such things, I'm sure, exist. It would, of course, harm the adversary as well, because we're in a global world. We have global networks, undersea cables, for example. So the EMP weapon, I suspect, if it's ever used, is going to be used at the very late stages of a major war. But you can never be certain. Therefore, having the ability for at least government and the military to manage basic communications would be fine. Most of us will find our electronics fried, unless we've taken the precaution to lock them up every night in a Faraday cage. And we don't do that. I certainly don't do that. I do keep my car keys in a Faraday cage because reasonably luxurious vehicles are so easy to clone the keys. So keeping them inside a tin box or equivalent, what Michael Faraday's great discoveries, we now call it Faraday cages. That's a simple precaution we can take. But if the EMP weapon is detonated in a major city, expect almost everything not to work for a while, because the expense of producing systems for controlling every part of our infrastructure that would be impervious to that kind of electronic emission is probably more than we can afford. But it is the case that critical national infrastructure in the United States, we know, has been probed very successfully by, for example, the Chinese intelligence services, and this is a matter of public record. And why have they done that? They haven't conducted sabotage so far, but they kind of, I suspect, would know where the pressure points would be if it ever came to conflict.
And by them doing these kind of these perimeter testing experiments, as it were, it does allow them to gain their own kind of intelligence, which kind of leads me to the next question, which is so I want to talk about a quantum computer and quantum computing a little bit, but to simplify it for people who don't know anything about what exactly it is. Can you explain to the audience what a quantum computer is, and how much of a threat that would be if the Chinese were to be kind of operating a quantum computer?
Well, at the moment we are able to use quantum effects, that is, effects at the micro level of the individual atom. At that level, strange things happen, which don't happen at a macro human-sized level. So you have these strange quantum phenomenon. It's very well researched. The quantum electrodynamics, for example, which the great American physicist, Nobel-winning physicist Richard Feynman created, is the most tested and the most accurate scientific theory that's ever been written. It's accurate to umpteen places of decimals. The predictions really work out. So we do know that it is possible to have what's called a superposition of states, where you can maintain, with a lot of technical skill, not just what we have today in our computers, which are millions of little gates that are either on or they're off, open or they're shut. And it's through the logic of these different gates that you can create, if you like, a calculation. But it doesn't have to be so absolute. At the quantum level, you can have situations where the gate is simultaneously in a superposition of being both open and shut. And you then can build logic circuits which do rather extraordinary things, so that in theory, and the theory is very well developed, it would be possible to have an answer to a set of calculations which would take years, if not decades, on a conventional computer. That actually your quantum logic is able to say that one of those sets of conditions already exists. So it's possible to get much faster to the right answer. And where this has been applied is in factorizing extremely large numbers, which is the basis on which all modern cryptography, public key cryptography, depends. So if you could have a workable quantum computer at scale that could take these very, very, very large numbers, which are what keep our communications safe, and actually crack them. This is the factorization problem, actually crack them in a short period of time, rather than saying, well, it's, take the age of the universe to factorize that number, then you have the beginnings of an attack on modern public key ciphers, such as the well-known RSA cipher. Now, those are the encryptions that keep our financial details secure in every financial transaction, that keep global financial transactions secure, that keep military communications secure. But they're vulnerable once somebody has worked out how to build a workable quantum computer.
Wow.
Companies have made models of this. The theory is well demonstrated. You can do it at small scale. But to build something that would be capable of working at the scale you would need to crack modern encryption is, I believe, at the moment, slightly beyond us. But somebody's going to get there at some point.
I was going to say, I think it's inevitable that it will happen.
Chinese friends who are spending a lot of effort on research in this area, if they get there first, then it's an interesting question, is what would they do with this power to enter all our communications, even our heavily encrypted communications? So that's a problem I've posed. The one answer is for governments, and this is happening in the United States and the United Kingdom, to start researching quantum resistant algorithms, so that even if you've got the quantum computer, it doesn't immediately enable you to strip off the encryption. There are some promising avenues, but it's all a bit theoretical, and it will take a long time to convert the world to quantum resistant encryption rather than the algorithms used today, which are so common that you can download them. Everybody knows what they are. It's very, very convenient. Now, my bet would be on the United States being the first country to build a quantum computer at scale. But you never know. So it's one of those possibilities in the future of which we have strategic notice. So we know it could happen. Doesn't mean it will happen.
No.
If we take the right kind of precautions, it will, not be a dramatic surprise, should it?
Yeah, I mean, when I used to work in the field, we used to use OTPs or one-time pads, where we'd have the 4 digits, 2 different sets of numbers either end. I'm sure you know better than I do, and that was considered at the time like completely uncrackable, and as far as I know, is still equally as secure to this day.
Unless you make a mistake.
Yeah,
and of course, notoriously, that's what the old Soviet Union did. The KGB communicated from Moscow to its agents all around the world using one-time pads. And these were issued. You had a copy back in Moscow and you had a copy with the agent. And provided they all used them securely, it was unbreakable. But under the pressure of the Second World War, they ran out of effort, if you like. So they duplicated pads and sent the same pads to different capitals around the world. And through some brilliant cryptanalysis at the National Security Agency, what was called the Venona Project, a brilliant cryptographer called Meredith Gardner and his colleagues at the NSA discovered this great secret, and over years of effort managed to uncover this secret. And what that demonstrated, some of the first communications to be decrypted revealed the existence of spies within the Manhattan Project. So if you remember the Oppenheimer film, that's how they got onto a number of the notable spies there. It also exposed the Cambridge Five, who had penetrated the British intelligence system. So from an intelligence point of view, this was a brilliant thing, but it took years of work. And that mistake, right, of duplicating the pads. If you don't duplicate the pads, you can't get into the ciphers.
Yeah, I mean, so much over the years, so many success stories have been down to human error or down to complacency or so many other things that which sometimes the good luck we've had with some of the operations we've done have changed the course of history. It's phenomenal. I'm going to mention your book briefly. Well, this particular book, because you've done it's about four books, is it you've done now?
Yeah, 4
Yeah.
books.
This particular one, which I'm going to hold up to the camera because so they can see it's called How Spies Think. Fantastic book. I remember when I first started reading it, one of the first things I come across was the word Umbra, and I was like, oh, okay, that's out there now. So I was very, very surprised to see that in black and white, but it was great. The lessons in this are absolutely fantastic, and it's current, it's modern, and it's something that is applicable to probably just about everybody in kind of everyday
It's a
life, I
guide to
suppose.
how to think clearly. It's a
Yeah.
guide to rational analysis. And in a world where we're surrounded by disinformation, deep fakes, all sorts of conspiracy theories, it's good to be reminded of what are the principles by which you can actually analyze a situation and get to understand what is really going on.
Yeah, and I love that because it literally teaches you about everything from the biases that we all kind of our cognitive biases and how to kind of get around them. And I think one of the best explanations that you gave was not to, when you're looking at something, don't look at something with the most arguments for what or that support what you believe, but look at the ones with the least arguments against what you believe. Or there was just so much. So I mean, I'd highly recommend this to anybody. It really is a brilliant strategical guide. And again, when you're on about disinformation and misinformation, yeah, we do live in a world. A friend of mine from MI6 not so long back sent me a video of me singing "I Feel Good" done on an app available to the general public that creates it in kind of
With elections coming up in both sides of the Atlantic, I am expecting all sorts of rubbish to come out. Deep
without
fakes. Some of them will be highly offensive, but once you've seen them, it's quite difficult to cleanse your mind of them. Even when you're told afterwards, it was a fake. He never said that.
And this is it. We do live in that world of confirmation bias. When we see something we agree with, it kind of reinforces our beliefs so much so that even if we are told afterwards it wasn't true, we've still gone down that path so far of believing, or confirming our biases that we don't care whether it's true or not. We've picked our team, as it were. So, I love the way that kind of teaches you to step back from it and look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, and something else I put in the book is just a reminder of, when it comes to the really important decisions in life, either at a personal level or the head of government, taking a big decision. When you think about it, two different kinds of thinking have to be integrated together inside that single mind. One is emotionally driven by the limbic system of the brain. It's all about, this is what I want. This is what I want the world to be like. This is what the world must be like. And the other part is rational. And it's the careful analysis of the options that are open and the limits, practical limits on what is actually possible. And you need both. I mean, Winston Churchill in 1940, I think, is a very good example, as is President Zelensky today. Churchill delivered rousing emotional appeals to the British to fight on in 1940. And, that was rhetoric. But he didn't forget that you actually had to produce the Spitfires, the Hurricanes, and set about reorganizing aircraft production, accelerating production. And the same is true of President Zelensky, whose narrative to the Ukrainian people to resist, to keep fighting, is done on the emotional side. But you mustn't forget the rational analysis of what are the priorities now for investment, for getting troops assembled, for recruiting. And he certainly hasn't forgotten that. But you need both. If you just have the emotional stuff, it all evaporates. You don't actually get action on the ground. But too much rationalism without a narrative isn't going to get you very far either. I don't know anyone who would be motivated to heroic deeds through an Excel spreadsheet. So you need both.
Yeah, actually, I just read the MOD intelligence report this morning on the activities of Russia in Ukraine at the minute, and the kind of where they've moved over to the second largest city in Ukraine in an attempt to kind of divert the Ukrainian forces and thin them out on the ground a little bit. Where do you see this heading in over the next few months? Do you think this is something that is going to be an all or nothing, or do you think it's going to fizzle out? How do you see this playing out over the next the foreseeable future?
My experience is that there will be hard pounding over the course of the year, but neither side is likely to make the really big strategic breakthrough. And Ukraine hasn't yet absorbed the additional support and equipment which will be arriving thanks to the decision of Congress. So it's not in a position to take immediate advantage of it. And the Russians know that, and therefore I'm not at all surprised to discover they're really probing very hard to see if they can keep the Ukrainians on the defensive rather than allowing them some room for maneuver. So sadly, I think this conflict will go on through the course of this year. What then happens when the spring comes and the thaw comes next spring, who knows? And in some ways it will depend on the results of elections still to happen.
Yeah, I suppose, probably would in many ways. So, I'm sorry to keep flip-flopping. I'm like a fly in a bottle today. I apologize. I'm going to go back to your books a little bit, because the 4 books that you've written are all non-fiction. Do you see yourself ever having a play or a dabble in the fiction writing side of things?
I think it pretty unlikely. I did have a think about it, but to be really successful, I'm not sure I could manage what you might describe as the sex scenes, which seem to be obligatory if you're going to have airport bookstall sales of thrillers. But there's a lot of competition. There's some very good writers now in espionage and near espionage fiction, producing really well-crafted narratives and really interesting ideas. There's a series, I don't know if your listeners have cottoned onto it, called Slow Horses, which has been made into a very good television series. But the premise there is a fascinating one, which is that the British security service, MI5, obviously it's a large organization. Occasionally intelligence officers make mistakes, sometimes quite bad mistakes. What do you do with them? You don't want to sack them, because then they might go and spill the beans and tell their story. So you keep them on, but you put them in a special department where they're called the Slow Horses, where they can't do any harm, but they're not actually given much by way of frontline work to do. And, the theme of the story is that actually some of these were the most talented but unconventional people in the service. And what they've actually done is bring together the capability to do some really quite extraordinary things, which the more conventional side of the office wouldn't necessarily have done. So it's those sort of conceits that I think fuel a really good book. And I'm not sure I'm quite up for that.
Yeah, I've got the book Slow Horses just there by McHerron. I have seen the first and possibly the second episode of the TV series as well, and it's something that's on my list. I don't really actually watch much television. I read more than watch TV, but it is on my list of things to go and watch and enjoy. I've been told so many great things about the series and about the actors playing the parts as well. So,
but writing is fun. On the 6th of June, the paperback of my latest book, How to Survive a Crisis, comes out from Penguin. And that was an interesting book to write because it's so topical. My prediction is we're in for more and deeper crises in the next 5 to 10 years. And we better start getting really serious about building up our resilience to them, not just the climate change related floods and droughts, but everything that's happening in the cyber dimension, cyber attacks and deep fakes. And we have a serious war in Europe. We've got serious conflict in the Middle East. We've got famines and droughts across Africa. The world is becoming a pretty chaotic place.
Yeah. And I mean, this is something that is, it definitely has a big market for people who want to be in a situation of preparedness. A few years ago, the community known as preppers they were laughed at, storing canned goods and that kind of thing. And now with what's happened over the last few years, with the likes of COVID and one or two other bits and pieces, where the minute there's been the hint of anything happening, toilet paper is sold out everywhere and all these kind of crazy things, more and more people are becoming more aware of the fact that they need to take certain precautionary measures, and not just in the physical side of things, as in, like I say, storing canned goods, but in the actual the mindset.
That's exactly right. I make a distinction in the book between emergencies, crises, and disasters. Emergencies happen all the time. Companies are used to, you have fires in the factory, you have product recalls, stuff happens. We can anticipate the kind of problems that might arise. We can have plans, contingency plans, we can adapt. And both in the United States and here in the UK and across Europe, we've got very good emergency services who can swing into action to help people in an emergency. But a crisis is different. A crisis is when things are hitting you at a pace and an intensity that the normal responses don't seem to work. It's what I call the rubber levers test. You pull the lever and nothing seems to happen. It doesn't have an effect on the ground. It just gets worse. And that's where the thought is, you're going to slide into disaster. And that's where having the right kind of mindset of the person at the top who gathers the team together, thinks innovatively about, how are we going to get out of this position. The COVID-19 was a very good example of some of the problems you run into when you've got a really big crisis to deal with. And some of the things you try and do may not work, or they may have the opposite effect to what you intended. So crises are difficult. And in the book, I highlight the worst kind of crises. And these are what I call the slow burn crises, where it's either been ignored or it hasn't been spotted. Perhaps it was too politically inconvenient, or people felt they couldn't afford to tackle it. But anyway, it gets worse and worse and worse until then you get a crisis, the problem explodes, but by then it's almost too hard to haul it back. This is what the 9/11 Commission, Congressional 9/11 Commission, after the terrible events of 9/11 concluded. It's the sort of paradox of warning that if you're not careful, you can't get enough support to do something about the problem until the problem has actually hit you. By which time it's got out of control. And the effort required then to deal with it is so much greater. So, we should all be looking out, whether it's in family life or in our organizations or even at national level, politicians looking out for what are those situations which are just little by little getting worse. And, when is the right time to intervene and do something about them before they explode into crisis?
And I suppose with everything that has happened recently, in many ways, like the likes of COVID-19, you've got not only a fresh set of answers as to how the public's going to respond, how foreign threats are going to respond, how globally we're going to work, unitedly with other countries, and which ones are going to be supportive and cooperative and not. But at the same time as having those answers, there's probably also another lot of questions that have arisen from the results of it too.
That's right. And one of the characteristics of major crises is they cover the whole sphere of life, the whole sphere of government. So COVID, it's a medical emergency. Obviously, it's the medical profession, medical advisors who take the main strain. But of course, this is going to affect everything. It's going to, you start to close schools and colleges to prevent the spread. You've got, what are you going to do about the border? Are you going to curtail flights in from certain countries? Before you know where you are, it's an economic crisis, as well as a medical crisis. And thinking through in advance, what I call anticipating, what would it be like if this were to happen? In the United States at the moment, there's the first signs of a really major bird flu pandemic spreading into animals, and possibly, I think there's been one case of human infection. Now, that needs careful monitoring and very early action so that it doesn't become a crisis. If you kind of leave these things for too long, then you are just building up trouble.
And with the likes of, so when you mentioned slow burn, one of the things that came to mind for me immediately was the international currencies, because it seems to be a little bit of a race to the bottom with the value of currencies at the moment, because of inflation, because of the way the world's going economically, and the production of more money to cover the kind of costs of livings and that kind of thing. Do you think this economical crisis is going to be something that they are going to resolve and kind of have something in place and say, right, this will fix it? Or do you think this is going to be a case of wait until the bubble bursts and then we will react rather than be proactive?
Well, as so often, the cynics would say, you won't get anything done until the crisis has actually arrived. I tend to be a bit more optimistic to think that you can spot the signs of trouble. And if you take the global financial institutions, it's clear, if you look at China and Russia working together now, there's a major challenge to the post-Second World War Bretton Woods institutions. The worst thing we could do is put our head in the sand and say, we're fine, we'll just keep going. Or we'll find a way of suppressing the views of, particularly of China, perhaps the second largest economy on the planet. That would be a mistake. On the other hand, the time is probably not right in terms of our relationships with China to sit down around a round table, let's have another Bretton Woods conference, with China, and build new institutions. I don't think we have the level of trustworthiness of Chinese behavior to do that. But that's what we should be aiming for, because we are going to have to adjust a lot of those institutions to modern circumstances. But we want it to be done. We must demand that it be done in ways that protect our interests, whilst at the same time recognizing the world doesn't look the way it looked in 1945.
Yeah, and in some ways, I'm kind of, I think back to when I was growing up as a child now, and I look at there was so much hope at the end of the Cold War, and kind of, you know, when there just seemed to be a kind of a hope that hadn't been even considered for so many years, and it's almost like we've gone back in time to a degree to kind of, you know, Russia is it's gone from being when the Iron Curtain fell, and Russia, we thought, oh, hang on, there might be a hope of a relationship here. Seems to have gone very much down the route of being the all-time enemy again, teaming up with China, and the threats seem to have kind of rebuilt themselves just in a slightly different way.
Who was it who said, you know, history never repeats itself, but it rhymes?
Yeah, that was it. Was it
So a huge mistake to say we're rebuilding the Cold War, because at the heart of the Cold War was an ideological confrontation on a global basis, and that's not what we're talking about here. But we're talking about a regime with an autocrat in charge who doesn't care for what we describe as the norms of decent international behavior, such as invading neighboring countries. So we've got to manage that, but you know, forget some of these tropes of the past, you know, appeasement or Pearl Harbor. You know, these are things which come quickly to mind to frame the way we think about problems. Actually, today's world, we've got to think anew about what actually is going on and how do we protect our interests, which we must do.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I'm sorry to keep you. Like, I'm all over the place with my questions here. I did have a structure for them earlier, and it just went straight out the window because it was just a really interesting topic. Do you think that the likes of artificial intelligence will end up having to have some kind of global regulation in place to kind of contain what could get quite easily out of hand?
Well, this is somewhere you can go back in history and talk about the invention of the printing press, or the internal combustion engine, or the aeroplane. And we didn't end up with global regulation, even national regulation, for quite a long time, until we'd worked out that, for example, just too many people were being killed on Main Street by speeding motor cars. So let's put in driving licenses, let's test people's ability to drive, let's say you can only drive on one side of the road, not both sides, along both sides. And the same is true of aviation. We've got international civil aviation authorities covering the whole globe. They cooperate very closely. I remember when I was putting together the British counterterrorism strategy, one of the most powerful things we did was get international global agreement that every civil airliner had to have a steel door fitted to the cockpit, so that even if in the back of the plane some terrorists had got aboard and were threatening to hijack the plane, they couldn't get into the cockpit, and the pilot had instructions: land as soon as you can, just get down and land. Hijacking has almost disappeared. Very, very, very difficult. And terrorists have given up trying to hijack airplanes in the way they tragically did on 9/11. And that's because of global agreement that, particularly in North America, you can't fly, they won't let you fly a civil airliner unless you're equipped with a lockable door to the cabin, and so on. So sooner or later, we will get some sensible security-related regulation of these technologies. But it's early days for AI. We can't, even yesterday, we were all surprised by yet another unveiling of the next version of ChatGPT 4.0. So this will go on, I think. And we've got big commercial interests in all of this, who aren't going to simply roll over and say, regulate us any way you please. They will want to say in what kind of regulation we have.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. So I'm aware we're coming up to the top of the hour, so I want to thank you very much for your time. It's gone so quick, and it's been so interesting, kind of talking to you about all of this. For everybody watching, what's next for you, and where can people find you? Are you on social media? Do you push yourself in the public eye at all?
I'm on LinkedIn, but the best way, if anybody wants to contact me, is through King's College. I'm a visiting professor in war studies at King's College London, and a quick Google search will reveal my King's College email. So that's very straightforward. Whether I'll get round to writing another book, I'm not sure. I say the paperback edition, Penguin paperback of my crisis book comes out on the 6th of June. So I'll be busy trying to promote that. Brilliant. Perhaps one final thought from me. Our conversation has been very much on the downside, the risk and all the rest of it. We shouldn't forget that these fantastic technologies, combination of biotechnology and artificial intelligence, is going to bring, life-saving medical treatments, new drugs, new materials, which will help with clean energy. It's going to be a very exciting 5 to 10 years ahead, and some of it's going to be really good.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that, actually, because there will definitely be. I mean, I know even with some of the things I've done now, if I've written a manuscript where I would have to pay a proofreader a lot of money to check it, which would take so much time, I can upload it to a program now that will do it in less than 10 seconds. So it's so some of the kind of time saving and the benefits that just for people like myself and so many others that are going to be gained from this will be phenomenal. So yeah. So right, the book, surviving how to survive a crisis, is that right?
Yep, How to Survive a Crisis.
And that comes out on the 6th of June.
Resilience and Avoiding Disaster.
Brilliant. I will definitely be getting a copy of that. So I dare say it'll be just as interesting, if not even more so than this particular one. There we go. I might have to come and get you to sign a copy for me, David, if that's okay.
Of course.
Brilliant. And thank you. So hopefully people will be able to get in touch with you if they've got any questions. And with regard, I take you looking at your bookshelf behind you, you're an avid reader. Who would be, before you go, who would be your top kind of 3 spy fiction authors that you would recommend or that you enjoy?
Well, I think some of the early authors, Somerset Maugham, well-known novelist, wrote a series about his real experiences as a member of MI6. The comic novelist Compton Mackenzie, he ran the Secret Service's operations in the Eastern Mediterranean during the First World War, and indeed wrote his memoirs. There's I think her name is Susan Hassler, former CIA analyst, who wrote an extremely entertaining but thrilling book about, if you like, counterterrorism from the point of view of the analysts, trying to put it all together. So there you are. There's plenty around.
Oh, well, that was brilliant. I'm glad I asked that because I'm not familiar with Susan Hassler, so that's something I'm going to be shopping on.
I may have got that name wrong. You'll have to check it.
I will do. I'll find that. That's brilliant. Thank you once again. And for everybody who joined in, I hope you like this. Please join us next time.
Bye for now.